personas. So obviously you're challenged now that you've identified 2, 3, 4, 5 key hooks and essentially therefore key communities you want to reach. Now we have to figure out who they are, really. It's one thing to say people who are interested in apps, or people who love music and so on. But we obviously need to get hone in a lot more and really flesh out who those people are and how we're going to reach them. So that involves, obviously, you need to become, one of the lines I always like in business is that you have to become you have to be the expert at your customers and their problems, maybe even more so than they are themselves. And it's the same, I think, with philanthropy and donations. You obviously need to become the expert at the things your potential donors care about in order to know how to reach them. And you need to be an expert at how they receive information, what they look up to, and so on. Otherwise, you won't know how to reach them. So in thinking about all these questions, and there's so many more that you could add. Who are they? Where are they? What do they care about? What do they look up to? Why will they support you? Why won't they? This is a good mental experiment, by the way, just to talk about for a little while. Not right now. We don't have a time breakout on this. But I kind of think it's really easy to spend your whole time brainstorming why people will support you. And it's really interesting to come up with a list of reasons why they, let's anticipate right now what the 10 number one objections will be for people who won't support us. Because then you can really think about how are we going to address those objections in our campaign itself. How are we going to alleviate their possible concerns? So a good process for kind of going deep with a particular target market that I really believe in is called personas. Has anyone here had experience doing persona development? Anyone? One, fantastic. So you'll be an asset to your table. So personas are, this has been an old-fashioned example, but personas are when you define your target market as a single person. So rather than just leaving it at this kind of abstract demographic level, our target is 30 to 45-year-old businessmen in Hong Kong, you need to get starting to get much more specific, because obviously 30 to 45-year-old businessmen in Hong Kong are incredibly diverse, care about all sorts of different things, have all sorts of different politics. It's not a useful group to target at. The only people who get to target at that kind of demographic scale are mainstream advertisers. TV ads are how you, magazine ads and so on, are how you target at these big groups of people in kind of roughly the same demographic. But none of us have those sorts of budgets, and that wouldn't work well anyway. So we need to get a lot more focused, a lot more tactical in how we're going to reach people. And so I think what helps to do that is to narrow your target market all the way down to a single person. Because when it's a single person, you can start getting really tactical around how would we reach this person? What would resonate with them? What would put them off? Now, people who haven't done this before often resist this approach. I used to work for a communications agency that worked with not-for-profits and social enterprises, and we would do this process with them. And people have never done it before. It can feel a bit counterintuitive, or that can create kind of quite a lot of kind of cognitive resistance as you think to yourself, but our entire audience is not this one person. You know, instead of 30 to 45-year-old men, you end up with, you know, Kevin, who's 38, who works at Deloitte. He was politically active at university, but hasn't been since, but he feels a little bit guilty about that. And he makes up for that with a modest amount of philanthropy to organizations around him. He's married, but no kids. And you flesh out all this different stuff. Or he's married and he has a kid. That means he's also involved in the school community, etc. And so you begin to like flesh out this really specific picture of Kevin. And of course, people say, but Tom, all our supporters are not going to be 28-year-old men named Kevin who are married with one kid, used to be politically active at university, now aren't, but alleviate their feelings of guilt through philanthropy. And you're absolutely correct. They won't all fit that precise description. But neither will they all be 20 to 35-year-old businessmen in Hong Kong. Like, they're both inaccurate. But one is usefully inaccurate and one is uselessly inaccurate. You can't do anything when you leave yourself with the inaccurate in the abstract target market of 20 to 35-year-old men. You do know what to do when you have instead the inaccurate but in the specific target market of Kevin. You go, how would we reach Kevin? We'd leverage school networks. We'd focus on alumni networks from certain universities. We'd target white collar, you know, firm. Maybe we try and do a lunch and learn. You can start coming up with some really specific ideas that would help you reach Kevin. And so that's what we're going to do. And that, I think, and of course, in the course of creating a plan to reach Kevin, you're in fact going to reach lots of Kevin-like people, other people who are part of the alumni group, other, you know, 27 and 29 and 30-year-olds and women partners when you go and do the lunch and learn at Deloitte. A whole variety of parents, of course, who are active in the school community. And so you'll hit a lot of Kevin-like people. But it will give you a set of specific steps. So I'll explain this why we've got this guy up on the screen. This is one of the this is a seminal early example of persona development. And it's my former boss at the communications agency I worked for called Make Believe. He used this as a key training material, which is why I still have it as well. And it's actually from a book written by Rick Warren, who's a megachurch pastor in Orange County in the US. And he's Obama's favorite, one of Obama's favorite evangelical leaders. And he did the, what's it called? He held the Bible or the swearing in. When Obama was first sworn in, he was there for that. And so and he's got a great book where he talks about his journey of moving to Orange County and starting his church, which is in a town called Saddleback, and is now just one of those giant churches, with tens of thousands of people every weekend. And within it, he described this process he went through that has become quite influential of figuring out who is the person he wants in his new church. So if you think like starting a church is just like starting anything else, it's not like he went to Orange County and there were no churches. There are lots of churches in Orange County already. Looked out, you might say, there's no gap here. Everyone who wants to go to church has a church. But he had a feeling that he could create something unique. But he had to get really focused on unique for who. If it's unique, it's not going to be for everyone, by definition. It has to be different from the status quo, or else, people already have those options. We're creating something different. And so he developed this persona of Saddleback Sam, who was his target market that he was going to focus in on to be the first group of parishioners at his church. And you'll see it's psychographics. It's not just demographics. It doesn't talk about his age necessarily, although you get a sense that he's middle-aged, white collar, and so on. But it's well-educated, likes his job, likes where he lives, so proud of Orange County, like to be there. Health and fitness are high priorities for him and his family. He'd rather be in a large group than a small one. That's a really powerful insight if you're setting up a church. How do you attract people who want to be in large groups, not small ones, to like day one of your new church? How do you convince them that they're going to be part of a big group? He's skeptical of organized religion. He prefers the casual and the informal over the informal. He's overextended in both time and money. And so some of the insights, some of the things that Rick Warren did as a result of this was one of the first church, it's a kind of a common template now, but just a massive amount of parking right around the church. And he really pushed that angle to his early parishioners, that you'll be able to park right next to the church. You're not going to be driving around for blocks and blocks looking for a place to park, wasting your time. He pioneered some of the kind of white person gospel style that has come back into America, with more of the kind of singing and dancing and rock and so on. He was one of the early because his audience preferred the casual and the informal over the informal, and that's also what helped draw a kind of large group and so on. And so this is what we want you to now do. I want you to pick your preference, pick one of your hooks, one of the target markets that you were just talking about, and build a persona for that particular target audience. Ultimately, I'd recommend that you do this for every one of your hooks. And so you've got, you've got a full 30 minutes to work on this because it's a really important piece. So we want to give them, I think it's just fun to flesh it out and give them a specific name, an age and occupation. But then we really want to look into these things. What are their values and goals? What are their community associations? What are the groups that they're involved with or have access to? Where do they get their information from? So what media do they consume? What media do they create? Maybe none at all. Are they the kind of person who creates media, who puts up YouTube videos, who tweets a lot, who's on Instagram, or do they just read or consume those platforms, or do they not use social media at all and they're all about the newspaper and the TV still? What are their challenges and desires? What's frustrating for them? What's got them excited? What are their hopes about the future? Of course, the more insight that you have into all of these things, and I realize that particularly at this stage, it's just a series of guesstimates. You're not. So another thing people resist is like, we don't have enough information to make this deliberation. But look, at some point between now and when you launch your campaign, whether through kind of clear-eyed articulation or just instinctively in the campaign, you're going to make a whole series of choices about who you reach out to and who you don't and how you reach out and so on. It's better those choices are conscious. And so just doing it even with a series of guesses, you'll have quite a lot of pretty accurate instincts, I think, oftentimes. around these people, and it's just about kind of getting them out, putting them on paper and being able to interrogate them, share them together and build a plan around them. And then of course after today, if you feel the need, you can of course go and do a lot of research. You could interview people, you could flesh this, you could go to town with this if you want. But my belief is that half an hour of focused brainstorming will get you kind of 90% of the way there, even without any data. That you're all active in your communities, you're all active in your issue, and you do have a, you're all active in this community, and you have a sense of what people's interests and desires are, or you wouldn't have got as far as you have already.